Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining me. My name is Amy Taylor. I'm a natural dyer and textile artist based in Chicago, Illinois. Today we're going to learn the eco dye, also known as the bundle dye method of natural dyeing using kitchen extras such as leftover coffee grounds, pericon flowers, turmeric, yellow onion skins, and edible marigold flowers. We're also going to incorporate optional acid and alkali modifiers, including cream of tartar and baking soda. Our supplies today are a stainless steel pot, dishwashing soap, twine or strong string, a vegetable steamer, alum, and natural fabric. Our dyes today are leftover coffee grounds, edible pericon flowers, turmeric, yellow onion skins, you can also use red onion skins, and edible marigold flowers. Some optional extras are baking soda, baking powder also works, wooden chopsticks or a small wooden dowel, and cream of tartar. Now let's get started! As with all of our dye projects, we need to start by washing our fabric. We do this to remove the chemical sizing on new fabrics and to wash off any sweat or dirt from our pre-loved clothing. In this demo, I'll be working with a 100% cotton bag and 2 rayon shirts. Next, we're going to pre-mordant our fabric using our Foodsafe alum. Mordanting comes from the Latin mordere, which means to bite. Mordanting essentially creates a chain of bites. So our alum bites the fabric and our dye bites the alum, thus creating a stronger chemical bond. We always want to put our fabric into the mordant pre-wetted. This ensures more even saturation and coverage. When sourcing our alum, it's important that we use alum that's specifically food safe. There are lots of industrial grade alums that shouldn't go in pots we eat out of. I personally like the alum from companies McCormicks and Saniti. In addition to being used as a mordant, alum, aka potassium aluminum sulfate, aka potash alum, is also used as a pickling salt. You can reuse your alum bath for future projects. Simply store it in the fridge for up to 2 weeks. Now comes my favorite part, decorating our fabric. For the cotton bag, I'll be using yellow onion skins, leftover coffee grounds, turmeric, and cream of tartar as a modifier. We begin by adding our dye stuff to the fabric. You can add your dye stuff to either wet or dry fabric. The important part is that it's mordanted first. Some people like to be really intentional about where they place their dye stuff, and others prefer to sprinkle their dyes more randomly. Both options are great. There's no wrong way, so I recommend trying each and seeing what's most fun for you. For this bag, I'm using cream of tartar as an acidic modifier to the onion skins. Be sure to check out my video about vat dyeing to learn more about modifying natural dyes. When our fabric is narrow enough, I like to use a chopstick or a small wooden dowel to keep my roll nice and tight. For this to work, you want your fabric to be narrower than the width of the chopstick. Twine is my favorite, but you can also use strong threads such as crochet thread instead of twine. Just be sure to use something that won't break when you pull it tightly. I like twine because it's really strong, inexpensive, and easy to find at hardware stores. I like slip knots to finish off my binding, but you can tie it off in whatever manner works for you. As long as the knot is tight and the twine doesn't come undone in the pot, you can use whatever finishing knot that you're comfortable with. For this tank top, I'll be using edible marigold, yellow onion skins, and cream of tartar. I first dyed this top about 5 years ago, and I want to give it a colorful refresh. Your foundation color doesn't have to be white, And you can always over-dye something if you're not happy with the first result. Natural dyes will only work on natural fibers. This means any fabric that comes from a plant or an animal, such as cotton, linen, hemp, most rayons, silk, and wool. When our fabrics are too wide to use a chopstick or dowel, it's no problem. We simply roll our fabric really tightly, sort of like rolling sushi or a burrito. Just make sure the roll is tight in the center and the sides. Just like with our bag, we'll tie a tight knot with our twine and tightly wrap all the way down, creating as much contact between the dye stuff and the fabric as possible. I recommend leaving a long tail at the top. This can be helpful later when we're doing our final tie-off. I like to add any leftover dye materials to the binding to add some extra color to the fabric. This is also a nice way to identify the different pieces once they're inside your pot. Starting from the top of the fabric where we tied on, tightly roll your fabric toward the working thread like a cinnamon roll. Be sure to keep the long tail of the twine free to tie off at the end. Tightly wrap the twine to keep the shape of the roll and tie off with a double knot. Add a few more extra pieces of dye stuff and you're all set. For this shirt, I'll be using edible marigold, edible pericon flowers, yellow onion skins, and leftover coffee grounds. Both of these shirts are made out of rayon, which is a fabric that usually comes from wood pulp. Sometimes rayon is made from petroleum, which causes the fabric to behave like a synthetic fiber, such as polyester, and thus won't work with natural dyes. When sourcing flowers and plants to use for our dyes, it's important to use botanicals that are specifically grown to be edible. Most flowers found at supermarkets and flower shops are treated with toxic chemicals and shouldn't be used in pots we eat out of. Both the marigold and pericon I'm using were grown with the intention of being ingested, so they're safe to use in a home pot. If you're saving your leftover coffee grounds to use as a dye, I recommend storing them in the freezer to prevent mold. Some additional kitchen extras you can experiment with are edible chamomile, tea leaves, ground up avocado pits and skins, and ground up pomegranate skins. When rolling and wrapping our fabric, we want to roll it and wrap it as tightly as we can. The important part is that we create as much contact between the fabric and dye stuff as possible. I like using the extra cinnamon roll method because it creates more contact between the fabric and the dye stuff, as well as being a space saver in the pot. I use this expandable vegetable steamer, but you can use any steaming device you have at home. Add water to your pot, keeping the water line below the base of the steamer. Then add your bundles to the steamer, making sure they don't touch each other. Cover your pot with a lid or something heavy like a baking sheet. The important part is to make sure the steam doesn't escape the pot. Cook the pot on very low heat for 45 minutes, then remove it from the heat and let the pot sit overnight. I know it's tempting, but don't peek under the lid until the next day. Once our bundles are ready, take them out of the pot and carefully remove the twine. Be mindful not to snip the fabric. Removing the dye stuff can get pretty messy, so I recommend unbinding your fabric over a trash bin to catch the extras. Or, if you have a compost bin, the used dye stuff can be great additions. To learn more about eco-dyeing, there are a ton of free and inexpensive resources. You can check out the blog on my website, MsAmyTaylor.com, and the blog at botanicalcolors.com. You can also check out your local library for some of my favorite eco-dye books. Eco Color, Botanical Dyes for Beautiful Textiles, Botanical Inks, Plant to Print Dyes, Techniques, and Projects, and Eco-Dyed Art Journals, Using Nature's Imprints. To remove the extra dye stuff and excess pigment that didn't bite the fabric, we want to give our fabrics a second wash. We simply follow the same steps as our first wash. Add some dish soap to warm water and swish it around. I recommend doing this step in a bucket or a bowl to prevent our extra dye stuff from clogging any drains. After your second wash, hang your fabric to dry, and then you're done! Congratulations on your new eco-dyed textiles! Please be sure to show off all of your beautifully dyed fabrics using the hashtag #CPLRadicalFit. You can learn more about my work on my website, MsAmyTaylor.com, or on my social media at MsAmyTaylor. Big thanks to Radical Fit and the Chicago Public Library.